Welcome to our talk on learning transfer. In this talk, we will be outlining what is transfer, how can students develop the ability to transfer their learning, what are some of the challenges faced by teachers, and the barriers students encounter in effecting transfer of learning, and we will conclude with how technology can be used to facilitate transfer of learning. Transfer can be simply defined as the ability to extend what has been learned in one context to a new context. Having provided a simple definition of transfer, we should talk about the idea that even though you can define it simply, it is still a very complex notion. The complexity arises because transfer of learning involves several factors and variables. We could be talking about the transfer of learning between concepts within one subject area. We could be talking about the transfer of learning between subjects, or we could in fact be talking about the transfer of learning between what is learned in school and the world at large. Transfer of learning requires cognitive flexibility, and that takes time to practice and develop. There are several types of transfer, which will be discussed in greater detail in the next few slides. Perkins tells us that we must consider not just if transfer happens, but under what conditions transfer occurs and what the mechanisms of transfer are. So when does transfer occur? An example of transfer would be learning how to graph data in a chemistry class, and then being able to recognize the independent and dependent variables in a biology lab and select an appropriate graphing method in that class. The student will have successfully determined the common features, committed those to memory, and used that information in a new context. There are many types of transfer: positive and negative transfer, or look at how transfer influences learning. Negative transfer would inhibit learning in a new context. For example, if a student was learning unit conversions by memorizing, this would inhibit their ability to learn new unit conversion methods. Whereas if they were learning unit conversion using dimensional analysis techniques, those techniques are applicable with any unit conversion in any subject area, and that would facilitate a positive transfer of learning and improve their performance in a future context. Near and far transfer. Near transfer is very closely related to reflex transfer. For example, once you know how to drive a car, those skills are easily transferred to the very near concept of driving a truck. Far transfer, on the other hand, it requires you transferring your learning into an entirely different context. This is a much more mindful form of transfer, and it requires some conscious effort. This could be a transfer between school subjects or even out of the school context into the world at large. Mindful transfer requires metacognition, requires thinking about why you know what you know. Mindful transfer requires initial guidance and practice for novice learners. How do we affect this mindful transfer? This leads us into the next few slides, which deal with how can we help students develop the ability to transfer.